We are going to start in Austin, Texas. All lines, as always, presented by our partners at BetMGM. Texas and Clemson in Austin. Clemson a 10.5-point underdog. We're going to talk about three things to watch in this ball game. The over/under 51.5. Let's start, Damien, where all good games are decided in the trenches. Texas's offensive line versus Clemson's defensive line. You look at Clemson's D-line, TJ Parker, Sammy Brown, linebacker, Barrett Carter, Wade Woodaz, that group in the front seven. Texas, better pass blocking than a run blocking team, but Parker's got 11 sacks. I think Kelvin Banks should be fine by the time this game goes. He was trying to go on Saturday, and Texas missed him really badly. I also think Clemson's D-line not quite as to the level of what Georgia has. But what do you make of this matchup in the trenches, Damien?
You know, I think that you kind of led into it, right? Like, Texas is much better protecting the quarterback than they are running the football, but they haven't done a phenomenal job of that all year. Now, a part of that I will point out is being the offensive line's problem, but another part I will say is Quinn's lack of mobility has really crushed them.
Yeah.
When you look at their rushing numbers, like take the Georgia game, for example. Georgia rushed for 141 yards. Texas only had 31. Now, Texas didn't run the ball that great, but Quinn was sacked, and so he lost a lot of rushing yards, and that affects their totals. So, you know what? I've been itching all day for this pod because I've got something I want to drop on you guys.
Okay.
Are you ready? This is my hot take of
I'm itching. I'm on the edge of my seat right here.
All right. I've been on the opposite of this all year long, but as of right now, today, it is time for Arch Manning to be the starting quarterback at the University of Texas. It is time. It's been Quinn's team all year. Listen,
I don't like starting him. I like getting him in more. I thought he should have played more on Saturday.
I want to start this guy. And you know what? I actually had producer Cam tee up a clip for us. So, Cam, why don't you throw that clip up for us so David and Chris can see, so the fans can see, and then I'll explain a little bit of what's going on for those who can't watch.
Let's see it.
So this is Arch Manning celebrating, opening drive touchdown against Texas A&M in that rivalry game. And you see the entire sideline. I'm talking people are crowning Arch Manning. People have every handshake, every celebration. And then you hear Arch at the end like, we here now. We here. Let's go. I don't see this Texas team surround Quinn Ewers like that. And all year long, it's been a problem it's been a conversation that we've been having because it's been kind of unfair. Well, you're at the point in the season where fair doesn't really matter anymore. We're talking about winning a college football championship here. If I'm Steve Sarkisian going into the college football playoffs, not even necessarily worried about this game against Clemson, but if I really want to shock the world and pull out a move that I think can be our trump card the rest of the way, I put Arch Manning in there and I let him just handle the reins and see what happens. Because another thing that we're not talking about with Quinn, he has been playing a little bit better as of recently, but Quinn will turn the ball over 1 to 2 times a game as well. Like, he's had some turnover problems. So I would love to see it. I
got two thoughts on this. One, I think they do need to feature more in the running game. You can't telegraph it as much. I think they gave him one real snap if you don't count the weird fourth down play where they snapped it between his legs. That was awesome from Sark, by the way, against against Georgia. They brought him in once to run some zone read. I think it was on a 3rd and short, something like that. It was very obvious it was coming. He got like 4 yards. Georgia covered it, but like if you're getting a read and you got the numbers, you got what you got. When you can't run it like that, I think you do have to feature him a little bit more. The difference, I think, is Clemson's 90th in rush yards per carry allowed. I think they'll be able to run the ball a little bit better against this team. But where I think you may be onto something, Damien, is after that pick that Quinn threw, where it didn't look like they might not get the ball back. I think it was like 4 minutes left. It was the one where he tried to throw the back shoulder, and the Georgia DB didn't give him position and just picked it on the inside. You would have liked to have seen him fight a little bit more for that ball, play DB a little bit, break that up, but is a pick. I did notice, for whatever it's worth, I think Quinn got hit on that play. He did walk to the sideline, because I was watching him the whole time. Nobody anywhere near him. Nobody, he crossed the sideline, he kind of had to walk back up and then talk to his teammates, and I was kind of watching the game at that point. I would have liked to have seen some offensive lineman or receiver go over and be like, hey, we're going to get the ball back. We're going to go score. We're going to go win this game. I didn't really see a whole lot of that from Quinn or from any of his teammates. So the juice factor, you might be onto something. I think it's interesting, considering Arch's background of, New Orleans private school kid, silver platter aspect of it. He doesn't act like that. He is very much a normal dude. I spent some time around him at the Sugar Bowl last year. So the fact that the guys seem to be rallying around him when on paper you wouldn't think that, I think is interesting. I don't know about start, But I will say, Damon, I'm with you. I think he needs to be a bigger part of the game plan because Quinn's ankle is what it is. It sounds like it's a high ankle sprain. I mean, he's still going to be pretty gimpy going into this playoff game. I like the idea. I think you still got to start Quinn, but much bigger part of the game plan I'd like to see. Chris, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. To me, the biggest question I have, though, in this game is can Texas just run the ball? Because they ran the ball against Texas A&M. They had gotten a lot better. Because, Ubben, you and I were at that Texas A&M game, and Steve Sarkisian says after the game, like, about a month ago, I challenged these guys. We had to run the ball better. And they had the rest of the way until Georgia. Clemson's a weird situation. The defensive line is talented. They've got a lot of sacks. They're not good at stopping the run. SMU averaged more than 4 yards per carry in that game. And Texas is going to have to run the ball in this game because whether it's Arch, whether it's Quinn, I don't think you're winning the game on the arm of either of them in this game. So can you run the ball? Is Kelvin Banks playing? Because Clemson, well, let's talk about Clemson here in a minute, but I know they won that game. I was actually not that impressed with them. But Texas, it's like we feel like all the potential's there. We haven't seen them get it done against a really good team. So we don't know.
Yeah, Texas did to Texas A&M what Ohio State was trying to do to Michigan. But it was interesting because, we've talked about Georgia this year. They don't have the Jordan Davises, the Jalen Carters in the middle. They're good stopping the run. They're not – Texas is probably going to face better defenses against the run in this playoff. Ohio State's certainly much better, if they see them at some point.
But Clemson is not.
Clemson's not. I think they'll be okay against Clemson. I think they'll manage. But I think if you're trying to go big picture, I like the thought, Damon. I think I was just because it was clear that Quinn was a statue in that game and couldn't do anything, could barely move. He was pretty good at being a little shifty and kind of extending some plays, but you could tell. And he had a pretty bulky brace. I think the game did like a segment on the brace.
Yeah, Laura Rutledge talked about it.
I saw it in pregame. I didn't get to see Laura's piece on exactly what it was, but I hadn't seen it before. But it didn't look great.
When she had to explain that was not a real leg that she was holding up there.
That's called not being committed. A true reporter would find a real leg to be committed to show the actual anatomy on the ankle. Maybe a cross section. We'll see.
Go ahead. I did want to say one more thing just to piggyback off what we're saying. And I want to put my stamp on, kind of why I'm saying that Quinn should be benched and Arch should be the starter. Because when we talk about this, if you just spell Quinn at times when you want to get Arch in there and get the run game going, it just gets really, really predictable. And then it's even hard for Arch to get in a rhythm if he's going to be an X factor in the game. Yeah. So that's why I say, yes, of course, if he plays bad and, you're not getting the production that you think you can get that spark, you go back to Quinn. But I really think that they should just give him a chance. Even if it's a full half, or even if he gets a turnover, even if he's not playing his best, just give him the chance, let him find a rhythm. And then that way, when he's in, it's not just okay, Arch is going to run or they're going to try to get the run game going. And then it's okay, we got to play a whole new game plan because they're probably not expecting Arch to start. They play a whole new game plan. Is he going to run? Is he going to pass? We know he can do both. Might give you a little bit of a competitive advantage.
The Clemson side of this. So I watched that entire Clemson SMU game on Saturday night, and they were constantly beating the SMU offensive line on the edge. Parker, they were getting pressure on Kevin Jennings, and Kevin Jennings had no time to sit back there. He was constantly having to make throws on the run. So that's the situation where, look, Texas's offensive line is obviously much better than SMU's, but can Clemson create that kind of pressure and force Quinn to move around? That is where they've had a lot of trouble. That's when the Texas offense and Quinn will throw an interception or two and not do that. To the point where, hey, maybe Arch can move around. And if it's a game, look, Damien, Alabama, they go from they put Tua in the game at halftime. They come back to beat Georgia in the national championship game. If Texas is up against it here and they're not moving the ball in the first half and they're taking sacks, I do wonder if a switch could happen in that situation.
By the way, it's Todd Berry at Louisiana Monroe that was doing that. Shout out to Todd. We got to get Todd on the show. The other matchup we were looking at is Clemson's receivers and hitting some explosive plays against Texas's secondary. Been all over the place. Texas, 19 picks this year. They've been fantastic. Bryant Wesco Jr., true freshman, he had 2 touchdowns of longer than 35 yards against SMU to help fuel that. Texas, 19 picks this year, third nationally, 7 consecutive games with a pick. I will say, if you look at Cade Klubnik, people we mentioned on Sunday, we're throwing dirt on Clemson all year. Outside of the Georgia game, if you look at the next 12 games, He's got 33 touchdowns and just 4 picks this year. Cade has been really good. He was not that far from the Heisman conversation. I think after the Georgia game,
yes, he was
just kind of. He was not as far as you would think. Chris.
We're not going that far.
We're just throwing everybody in the Heisman talk now. What are we doing?
I'm not saying. I'm just saying if they are competitive in that Georgia game and Clemson maybe beats one of the teams that they lost to, he's not going to win it. But like the idea, I think at one point in midseason he was like the 8th highest betting favorite. My point is. He's not that far from this. It's not crazy. He had a really good year, but because Clemson had such a bad year, despite the fact they made it for late, that people slept on how much better Cade was this year. 33 touchdowns, 3,300 yards, and 4 picks. Chris, by any imagination, or by any stretch of the imagination, that's a good year. He's been really good.
It is.
And so he needs to be careful.
It's just not a Heisman year is all I was trying to clarify.
No.
He's been very good.
I'm not saying he's good. I'm just saying he wasn't as far as people think. People just like don't talk about Cade at all.
This
he had a
is
really
not
nice
the year of quarterbacks winning the Heisman.
This is true.
Let it go.
Heisman aside, I've derailed this conversation. My point is he's been really good and he's been really improved. Yes. This offense has been better, and they still don't really have the big-time weapons. I think all the criticism about Clemson early in the year is still fair. That Wesco has had a nice season. He's been good, but Cade has kind of been fueling a lot of this, and I think it's up to him to find some more explosiveness because Clemson is not going to be able to dink and dunk their way down the field against this Texas team. Texas defensive front is too good. Their cornerbacks are too good. They play really aggressive. They're really physical. They have great, obviously, ball skills. So that's going to be a huge matchup. Chris, how do you see this one playing out, and what are you looking for when you look at Clemson's receivers against this Texas secondary that's been really, really good all year long?
So Wesco is really good. He's really fast. SMU was terrified of him. But the whole Clemson-SMU game played out very weird because SMU immediately spots Clemson 14 points, like right off the bat, in a bunch of short fields. But for the rest of the game, SMU was the better team. They just were running out of time until the very end when they make it happen. So Klubnik throws 4 touchdowns in this game, 24 for 41, but only 6.4 yards per carry. They weren't getting a lot downfield, and it was a very weird. There were a ton of plays in that game that was either a drop or a really good breakup by an SMU defensive back, where like Clemson was not moving the ball much at all the final 3 quarters, but it always felt like they were really close to doing it. So I don't know. We'll talk about SMU later in the show. I don't know if that was just SMU playing really good defense, of which I do think they have a really good defense, but we know Texas has a really good defense. And you're going to have to get those explosive plays, like we said. You're going to have to find Wesco down the field, and you're going to have to protect because SMU sacked Klubnik 3 times. SMU has been one of the better defensive lines in the country, but 3 sacks, 8 TFLs. They were getting in the backfield very frequently, and it was causing a lot of problems for Klubnik.
Yeah, Damien, anything you like in this matchup in the Clemson passing game and in terms of Cade's weapons?
Yeah, well, honestly, I like Texas defense better. I mean, this is a really good ball-hawking secondary. And one thing that I love, and an underrated thing that we don't even talk about because we don't talk a whole lot of X's and O's anymore. We're talking about road to the playoff. Texas is really good at playing man-to-man coverage. They can match receivers. They can run with them across the field. They can lock them up on vertical shots. So I think they have the edge. We'll just see if these Clemson receivers can match up. And I think that something that will have to help them is Phil Maffa has to be way better than he was against SMU. I mean, he had 10 carries for, I think, 25 yards, close to 2.2 yards a carry. Like, he was a complete no-show. And if this game is one-dimensional for Clemson's offense and it relies on Cade Klubnik trying to pick apart this Texas defense, I don't think that's favorable for Dabo Swinney and the Tigers.
The thing I'm looking forward to in this game is an opportunity for Clemson. I mean, I didn't think Clemson was going to win that game. If you look at Clemson's schedule, before the SMU game, their best win, Chris, was probably Virginia Tech at 6-6.
Correct.
They lost to Louisville. Yeah, they just haven't beat anybody.
You were saying that was the time in the pod when you were saying Clemson was back, and we were saying, Ubben, they haven't beaten anybody yet, and then they went and lost.
To be fair, they
Louisville.
beat the heck out of a lot of bad teams, Chris. For that still counts for something, I guess. But they just hadn't beaten anybody. And Texas, they're a lot better than SMU. That's just the reality of where we're at. And if Clemson wins this game, it doesn't help a lot of their street cred that they've ruined the last couple of years. They're not all of a sudden Clemson of old, but I think it does. Winning the ACC in the way that they did it, which I can't believe we're talking about Clemson here. It helps you a little bit of hey, maybe this program isn't in a total decline. beating Texas is like, well, maybe there's a world in which they can get better. I still think it comes down to recruiting and their lack of activity in the portal and the fact that you do have, I don't know if I'd call Cade Klubnik a generational quarterback. He was close to it.
I wouldn't either. Nobody loves Cade Klubnik more than David Ubben on this podcast right now. He's almost generational. I mean,
he was
almost
close. No,
My
point was he was close to a generational prospect. He has not been a generational player in college. That was my point. He was like the number one, number two guy in his class. That's all I'm saying. My point was that he has not been a generational type player in college. You guys are jumping all over me. I think Cade Klubnik's good, and he was like 8th in Heisman odds. And you're like, he's going to win the Heisman? He's a generational player? I'm not saying that. Anyway, my point is, I think Clemson, it does do a little bit for them if they beat a Texas team that I think we would all agree is good enough to win the national championship without sort of a second thought. That's a really meaningful win for Clemson. And to back it up with having that win over SMU, that whatever you think of SMU, certainly not high on street cred right now, they were the team that didn't lose all season long in the ACC. So I think Clemson's got a lot on the line here.
Yeah, if Clemson beats Texas, you're like, Dabo Swinney's back, man. Not to say the program is going to get back to where it was, but he's going to have a lot of, I told you guys, so you counted us out, and look what we did. And he will have every right to do so if that's the case. That doesn't mean it fixes the long-term trajectory of the program. But this is an opportunity to kind of punch back at everybody, including us, who've been taking shots at him for a couple of years now.
Yeah, let's get a quick pick. Damien, what do you like in this game?
I'm going to go Texas. I think even with Quinn, like I said earlier, I don't think Arch starting is paramount for this game. I think it's for if they do want to unlock that championship potential. But with or without Arch being the guy, I still think Quinn can get it done. He has been passing the ball better. I know we talked a lot earlier in the show about how earlier in the year, I should say, he was doing a lot of check downs. He wasn't getting the ball very far down the field. He's starting to do that a little bit better. He can cut down on the turnovers. I still think they can win. I think they can run the ball a little bit better. Obviously, this Clemson defense isn't great at stopping the run, so I like Texas.
Yeah, I think Texas is too good on both lines of scrimmage. I just think Clemson is not going to be able to compete there. Texas is going to control this game, win this game comfortably. I think they can. I do think we're going to see some dogs barking in this playoff in the first round. I don't know that Clemson jumps out to me as a team well suited to do that. Chris, where are you at on this one?
I'm going Texas. I'm going Texas covering the 10.5 that they're giving. I just don't think Clemson's going to be able to score. Like the 34 points they scored against SMU was very shaky. I think they had under 400 yards of offense, or maybe under 300 yards of offense in that game. SMU spotted them a lot of points, a lot of short fields. And so if Texas just doesn't do that, which Texas can, they did do that to Georgia earlier this season, gave Georgia a lot of short fields. As long as Texas doesn't make those bad mistakes, I don't see Clemson being able to score the ball. I don't see them being able to run. And if it's all on Klubnik against that secondary, it's going to be tough. So I think Texas wins pretty comfortably.